Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a sci-fi movie review and we'll be having a look at Judge Dredd. This is the Stallone version, not the more recent film just called Dredd. And do you want to talk us through the plot, Chris?
Well, yeah, basically it's Sylvester Stallone plays Judge Dredd and they're in, is it Mega City?
Yeah, Mega City 1.
Mega City 1, and they're basically the law, they upkeep the law, and basically he is framed and sent to jail, if I remember rightly, and he has to escape, clear his name. And
it turns out who the guy who's framed him is a clone of himself, or a clone called Rico, who played by Amanda Sante, is it? Yeah.
And this is his brother, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
His brother or something, yeah. And,
but yeah, so then obviously it's obviously Judge Dredd's sort of mission to sort of try and clear his name, come back to Mega City 1, and you know, he has a couple of allies along the way, and ultimately have a kind of face down with Rico, and Rico's basically got himself a kind of giant robot protector as well, one of the ABC warriors. So Judge Dredd was obviously based on a comic book, 2000 AD, which was a UK comic, which was quite popular here in the UK, and less so abroad, I have to say, but you know, it was quite popular, certainly for the time when this sort of movie sort of came out and probably preceding it. And this movie has kind of, it really was a kind of a mixed opinions. It kind of divided, I think, a lot of people's opinion about it. And a lot of people look back at it now and kind of think, oh God, that was a stupid film. But I think it does have a few merits. I mean, the thing is, nowadays you've got the kind of the newer Judge Dredd from Dredd, and that was a lot more gritty. It was kind of a lot more of a realistic take on Judge Dredd.
And what probably the comic book would have been.
To a degree, I think. Now, I think the Dredd film, if we're talking about the more recent one, maybe kind of went. It was a low budget film, but it kind of, to me, I mean, Judge Dredd, you've got lots of mutants and things. It's a lot more sci-fi than I think the Dredd film was, the actual comic. But I understand why they did it, because the Dredd film was a relatively low budget movie, so they couldn't maybe have a lot of the kind of like the more fantastical elements in there. Obviously, there was some sci-fi bits in there, but what I would say is the Judge Dredd movie, actually the Stallone one, in certain ways was more true to the comic into a degree, because you had a lot more of the kind of the characters in there that were actually based on the comic, like Mean Machine, for example. However, some of them were kind of bastardized to a degree. And the main thing that obviously people sort of complain about this movie is the fact that Stallone obviously takes his helmet off. Now, the comic, Judge Dredd never took his helmet off, and in the newer film, he never takes his helmet off. But because you've got Stallone in the film,
they weren't going to pay all that money to never see his face, I guess.
Exactly.
So,
and
that's probably why they put the plot in where he gets framed and gets to prison. So it gives you
the reason to have a mask off. Now, you know, that for purists, that's gonna be a major piss off. And you know, I can understand that, unfortunately, but these are the whole point. You're going to have a big name, you aren't going to cover them up. I mean, Carl Urban, who plays Dredd in the more recent one, is really not nearly as big a name as Stallone was certainly in those days, you know. But I would say I think I quite like the armour. You know, that probably actually looks, or you know, the way the Judge Dredd sort of costume looks is actually probably more of the comics than the more recent one. Plus, as I say, you've got certain characters that were sort of taken from the comics.
One thing I didn't like about the Stallone one was the sort of comedy element with that guy. I can't remember, Rob Schneider,
and he played Fergie, I think the character's called. And I mean, this was the other thing. This was a very dumb film.
It was too tongue in cheek, tongue in cheek, and I think it got slated when it came out. I think because the director was, I think, one of the first films this guy had ever done, and they slated him for making it more of a parody. It's more of a parody in it, in some ways. I mean, it's got good elements to it, but
to be honest, I think the kind of the whole of 2000 AD world, you know, it's very, very expansive. There's maybe the kind of the scope of this film just couldn't handle it. And you're absolutely right. The criticism is this film is way too jokey. I actually quite like Rob Schneider as a comedy actor, but I didn't like him in this.
It doesn't really work
no,
because it makes it too comedic.
And I actually quite like Fergie in the comics. I actually used to read 2000 AD, and I actually quite like the Fergie character in the comics, and he's not actually in anything like he is in the film. I know you don't really read the comics, but
was it the villain as well? You had, who else did you have in it? You had Max von Sydow as well.
Yeah.
Who was in it? Wasn't he was he the police?
He was like the kind of the head judge.
That's right.
Basically, and
I haven't seen it for a while. But...
Yeah, and you also had, let's say they incorporated the ABC Warrior robot Hammerstein into it. They kind of changed it a little bit, but I thought that the effects on him were really good. They used practical sort of effects to sort of make. And I thought
that sort of stuff reminded me a bit of RoboCop actually.
Yeah,
that kind of element.
The kind of the weird sort of clone things they had at the end. They were kind of rubbish. I think
when you say about the new one, Dredd, I mean, when I saw that, I mean, it's not a bad film, but I think that was over violent in places. It was kind of like just sort of and there was no real characters. The characters were kind of a bit 2D, very cardboard. Especially the villains. They weren't really anything standout, I didn't think.
No, I quite like the Dredd film, to be honest, and I liked it, a lot better than this one. Although there are still some things I do like about the original Judge Dredd movie.
So maybe it's kind of like get a film where it's kind of in the middle, both of them.
Yeah.
Maybe the happy medium.
But the problem is that the Dredd financially bombed, and Judge Dredd was panned. So to be honest, the character hasn't had a particularly good, historical, sort of, time with it in regards to the sort of cinema. So I think it's unlikely that we'll see another sort of Judge Dredd movie anytime soon. And the problem is obviously the lower they go with the budget, the kind of less you're going to sort of see the kind of like the elements maybe that you're going to want to see. I mean, there's so many sort of characters to kind of choose from in regards to Judge Dredd. And as far as I know, if they were going to make a second Judge Dredd, they were going to have like the I think it's Judge Caesar, and then they were going to do the Death Judges for the third movie.
But it wasn't that successful. Dredd.
No, it was. I mean, it did okay on like DVD and stuff. So there is still a kind of
it was in 3D, wasn't it? In cinema and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I thought it was a good film, and I think Carl Urban was really good in the role. I think Stallone was miscast, to be honest, in going back to the sort of the original Judge Dredd.
Yeah, they didn't really need. Again, I think what they should have done on the original Judge Dredd is have an actor that was smaller.
Yeah, and you could have maybe had Stallone in it, but maybe had him in another role. But the problem is, and I think, and this is what I'm going to come back to, for two things. The time when this film was made, the way films were much more star powered than they are these days.
Yeah.
So the driving force on movies when this film came out was the star behind it rather than the subject. These days it's a subject I think people go and see, not the star.
It was a Stallone movie rather than
a Judge movie. It was Stallone Dredd, Judge Dredd rather than just Judge Dredd. And the other thing is, I don't think you really had the sort of the mainstream gritty action films that you do now. Back then,
no, they were sugarcoated.
Yeah, so you mentioned not the comedy. Right. So again, this film suffered, I think, because of when it was made.
Yeah, dilute. But the new one, they don't dilute the violence whatsoever.
No, not at all. And in fact, they made a point of having it particularly violent because it's a violent world that Judge Dredd lives in. So it's an interesting thing. The problem is, they could have made it maybe a more commercial by having other decisions made in it, but the new one didn't do very well, unfortunately. And I think part of the reason is obviously that Judge Dredd really isn't that well of a kind of, people just don't think about it these days unless you're a kind of a fan of the comics and that sort of thing. But there's missed opportunities I think with both films. I think the Dredd film is better by quite a margin, but I do think there is some elements of. I certainly like the design aspect of the Judge Dredd movie with Stallone, but I think it was not well executed.
No. like you say, he's miscast. He didn't have to have him in it. It could have been anyone.
Yeah, I mean, take Stallone out of that. I think that would have been half the problem. Or have maybe Stallone do what you could have done is have Stallone as the bad guy, his brother.
You know, I can see, like the fans, obviously, because half the film, he's not even Judge Dredd, is he? He doesn't look like Judge Dredd. Yeah. He's just Stallone. So it's kind of like,
why the hell do they put contacts in it? This is the thing I always wonder with this film, right? Is because in the comics you never see like really Judge Dredd's face, and in a couple of copies see him with bandages. But why put blue contacts in? Because you never see him. He's not got blue eyes, especially because you never see his face. I can't understand why they did that, but they look blatantly fake, Small point there, but it kind of always bugged me that particular thing. Anyway, what would you give out of? So we're talking about the Stallone Judge Dredd.
Stallone Judge Dredd 4, maybe 5.
I'll give it a 5, so we'll call it a 4.5. So, what are your opinions, and how do you think it actually compares to the more recent Dredd film? Leave us a comment, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.